Yes, Edelgard is one of the greatest villains in all of fiction, and I'm tired of pretending she's not. So why does the discussion around this character feel so weird? Sympathetic villains like Sasuke, Pain, Askeladd are all ridiculously glazed, and rightfully so. But Edelgard is never included in that conversation. I don't think it's because she's poorly written. I think it's because one route changed our perspectives completely. My name is Lucky7, and today we'll explore why Edelgard belongs in the GOAT conversation despite the problems with Crimson Flower. To understand why Edelgard wanted to conquer Fordland, we have to go back to the beginning. She was a princess born to the Adrestian royal family, a large family with 11 children. So what happened to Edelgard's mother and 10 siblings? Her mother disappeared and the children were all kidnapped. They were taken away by those who slither in the dark. They were all locked in an underground basement and subjected to cruel experiments which can be better described as torture than science. Edelgard's hair literally turned pure white from the stress. Of course they all died, except for Edelgard of course. She was the only one who could survive it, and gained the Crest of Flames, the same one as Byleth, Sothis and Nemesis. They then allowed her to go back into public life as the Adrestian princess, suffering essentially no charges for their actions. You know why? It's because they were in league with the nobles, one of them being Duke Ayr. Yes, Ferdinand's father was in on it too. So Edelgard grew up surrounded by the people who'd helped destroy her family. They'd forced her to play the role of princess in a system that had already shown it could torture children to death and suffer no consequences. This is the foundation of her worldview. Edelgard learns that authorities aren't designed to serve people, they're designed to prey on the weak. She learns that nobles, ministers, and shadow governments can destroy your life while smiling at court. She learns that the law means nothing if those who control it are both powerful and corrupt. So her solution is not cooperation, it's control. If every independent power has a potential knife at her throat, then peace can only exist once every knife is in her hand. You see how, in context, Edelgard is less of a domineering girl boss and more of a tragic child whose innocence was stolen away from her? I think people relate to that not because of her experiences but because of her worldview. Distrust of authority is very common among younger generations these days, as we start questioning institutions that claim they act in our best interest. But Edelgard goes 10 steps further than most of us would dare. Is it any wonder she wanted to conquer Fordland? She can't take orders from the church, and she can't trust Fargus and the Leicester Alliance not to betray her. She simply strikes them before they strike her. Now, all that being said, Edelgard is wrong, completely wrong, and that's why it's brilliant. When you really break down her reasons for starting this war, they make sense for her emotionally, but they're a bad course of action given what we know about Fordland. Her first objection is that the church has too much power. This is self-refuting. The church cooperates with the 3 countries in Fordland while Edelgard wants to conquer them. If the church is too authoritarian, then Edelgard is worse than them by her own metric. Rhea distributes the hero's relics among different noble families and countries, while Edelgard wants to control and subjugate all of them. But again, Edelgard isn't supposed to make sense. She actually doesn't oppose centralized power as a concept. She opposes centralized power that isn't hers because she's paranoid. And that's understandable, but it's still wrong. Secondly, she accuses the church of manipulating history, ruling from the shadows, and using people as tools. The irony is that she says all this while literally cooperating with those who slither in the dark. So are you really in any position to criticize the Edelgard? Anyway, what really happened? Yes, Rhea lied about Nemesis and she manipulated history. But she didn't do it for personal gain, just think about it. Why would Rhea gain anything by making Nemesis, the man who slaughtered her family and desecrated their corpses, look good? She did it because the truth was dangerous. The truth was that Fordland was built on genocide, grave robbing, and weapons made from the bodies of her family. So Rhea creates a false story about Nemesis as a corrupted hero because she wants to stabilize Fordland. She wanted to prevent another war between her followers and Nemesis's followers, and this corrupted king narrative helped facilitate that. Naturally, Edelgard doesn't care to figure any of this out. The moment she finds out that the church lied about something, she treats it as an immediate confirmation that they're evil, which makes sense for her character. It's great writing. Her final objection is that the system of nobility protects incompetence and prevents great warriors and leaders from rising up. So she wants to smash the whole system and build up a pure meritocracy. This seems valid until you realize there are 3 issues with her plan. Firstly, crests will continue to exist and give those people an unfair competitive advantage, which would recreate the same results where the nobility rises to the top and the commoners sink to the bottom. Secondly, the church already gives commoners a chance if they demonstrate talent. Ignaz, Ash, Dedu, Leonie, Dorothea, Shamir, Cyril, Gerald. Gerald being the literal greatest knight in all of Fordland. I'm not saying there isn't discrimination, because there obviously is, but the notion that commoners aren't allowed into positions of power is false. Think about it, they literally have a whole floor of the academy dedicated just to commoners. Moreover, is there any noble among the three classes who doesn't belong in that position? They're all exceptional kids. Finally, are discriminatory attitudes really worth waging a war over? Like Edelgard has disagreements over economic policy, so she'll murder innocents and conquer nations? Like what? So on the crest point, I was going through some supports and realized that Edelgard did address this. She proposed we give everyone access to crest power, which still doesn't really solve the problem. On paper, it sounds nice. If only nobles have crests, then give everyone a crest. But the second you remember how artificial crests actually work in the story, the idea becomes insane. Those who slither in the dark tried this, and the result was child torture, dead siblings, shortened lifespans, and human weapons. So what exactly is the plan here? Let's follow in their footsteps but in a nicer way, breed children into super soldiers so that they can compete in the entry-level job market? You're not liberating anyone, you're still worshipping crests by doing this. The real solution to inequality is not to demand that everyone become exceptional, it's to care for everyone even when they aren't exceptional, because they still have human dignity. And this is where Edelgard's obsession with merit becomes unsettling. Her supports with Linhardt are a great example. She has a huge problem with his lack of productivity, but eventually adapts to his unusual work ethic. It sounds nice, right? She's like learning to appreciate him. Until you realize that she only accepts him because he is still obviously brilliant and useful. But what if he wasn't? What if his dream was to just be an average guy? Edelgard's worldview has no answer to this, because she does not truly escape the logic of the system that hurt her. She just replaces inherited worth with productivity instead. All these reasons are understandable but bizarre once you consider that the other leaders, Rhea, Byleth, Claude, and Dimitri, are all reasonable people with whom she could have just had a conversation. In the other routes, we see that Fordland's leaders already had issues with the system and were capable of reform. Dimitri didn't need Edelgard to invade his home to realize that Fargus had problems. Claude didn't need a continental war to oppose isolationism and false history. Rhea didn't need to be slaughtered for the church to change. War was never needed. Again, keep in mind, I'm not hating on Edelgard. Even though war was not needed, it makes sense that someone with her background wouldn't trust in negotiations to achieve her goals. Edelgard repeatedly talks about this idea that she'll make things happen through her own strength, and this is just an extension of that worldview. This mindset of doing things yourself and making it happen with hard work is often glorified in storytelling, and I love that Edelgard embodies it in a less healthy manner. She's like a criticism of this shonen idea that if you work hard to achieve your dreams, everything will just work out. That's not a critique against the game, that's me praising the fact that intelligence systems somehow manage to make a warmonger feel sympathetic. You ever notice how Edelgard is much more stubborn than the other lords? Dimitri can be talked out of revenge. Rhea can be talked out of her extremist attitudes. Claude was always reasonable. Edelgard is the only one who will either succeed in her conquest or die trying. There is no middle ground. There is no compromise. There's no version of the situation where she lives and doesn't conquer Fordland. But why? I think it's more than just trauma. I think it's survivor's guilt. Edelgard reminds me a lot of Sasuke Uchiha in that sense. His whole clan died and he feels that guilt, asking why only me, as if to rationalize the reason for his existence. He comes up with various answers. At first, he's alive because he has to kill Itachi. Then he's alive because he has to destroy the Leaf and expose their lies. Then he's alive because he's the only one with the power to reform the world and subjugate it as a global dictator. That reminds me of someone actually. The truth is, both these characters are driven by a similar goal, and it's not peace. They want to create a world where no one will ever have to go through what they did. They will subjugate the world and kill every bad guy if they must. They refuse to accept any compromise where the system stays the same. To them, the idea of a tragedy like theirs falling through the cracks of an imperfect system is just unacceptable. No young boy will ever have to watch his family die as his older brother betrays him. and no young girl will ever have to watch her siblings get killed in an underground lab as she's forced to be a state puppet. That's powerful stuff, and that's why I refer to Edelgard as one of the greatest villains ever written. Her need to fight is so compulsive that she just physically cannot accept mercy. In Silver Snow, she begs Byleth to kill her or the war will never end. She's really saying that if Byleth spares her, she will not stop fighting, even if she knows it's wrong.
If you do not act now, this conflict will go on forever. Your path lies across my grave.
You ever feel trapped in your own mind, wishing you could be anyone but yourself? Because you just can't ignore certain habits or compulsions. Maybe you take things too personally, maybe you have trouble sleeping. That's Edelgard, except her compulsion is conflict and war. That's why The Edge of Dawn resonates so deeply. It's about her desire to be a normal girl and how the Academy helps her express her true self without letting the past dominate her life. For just this moment lost in time, I'm finally me, is such a beautiful lyric because it really captures that feeling. Edelgard isn't a warmonger, she's just a girl who wants to live in peace and enjoy these blissful Academy days. This needless killing hurts her just as much as it hurts her victims. Yet she just can't stop. That is the tragedy of Edelgard. You could debate that perhaps she turned out this way because of circumstance, that, this was all inevitable, or you can make the case that she had a choice, and that she refused to rise above her trauma like Dimitri did. Whether you think she's at fault or not, it's fucking sad that Edelgard not once gets a happy ending, except for, well, Crimson Flower, I guess. I believe that Crimson Flower is the reason why discourse around this game has been so awkward. I think it's one of the main reasons Edelgard isn't commonly considered to be a top-tier villain, and it's because it tries to pretend that she was right. When fans play this game, they see 4 different routes, where you can side with any of these lords and watch them succeed. It immediately raises the question, why would I want to watch Edelgard succeed? She's insane, inconsistent, and incorrect. And unlike Dimitri, she refuses to cooperate or compromise at all. I know people IRL who played this route and went, really? That's her justification for this war? That sucks. And even online discussions get dominated by this, Edelgard is right or Edelgard is wrong, when it should be, here's why Edelgard was such an amazing villain. The problem is, if we can't agree that she was a villain, there's not much to gush over now, is there? I think the writers realized how absurd this conclusion was too, which is why it's a secret route with only 6 chapters. And in order to make Edelgard seem somewhat justified in her actions, they create various character inconsistencies and contradictions that just don't fit with the rest of the game. For example, to make Edelgard's conquest of Fordland seem more reasonable, they retcon Claude to say that he wanted to do it too. What the hell? I played Verdant Wind, and it was all about Claude wanting cooperation between sovereign nations, not conquering Fordland, but they had to rewrite him to also want conquest so that Edelgard looks a bit less power-hungry and a bit less crazy in comparison. Same thing with Dimitri. His death scene in this route is genuinely one of the worst things I've ever witnessed. In Verdant Wind, Edelgard's soldiers kill him because she just can't bring herself to face him after what she did. Here, she literally gives him no option of surrender and just kills him, waffling on and on about how he was obsessed with her and that obsession has taken over his life. Excuse me? You invaded his kingdom. He's defending his home, but somehow he's the one obsessed with vengeance? You sure? She then goes on to say that without this obsession, he could have been a benevolent leader. What the fuck? In which universe was Dimitri ever anything but a benevolent leader? Yeah, he was self-destructive for sure, but he always loved and respected his people. She then argues that by killing him, she's saving him from himself because this is all she can do for him. Sure, totally. That's why you invaded Fargus. It had absolutely nothing to do with your lust for power. You came here to save your friend, and that's why you killed all these soldiers. Even the religious messaging is just so poorly done. She claims to stand against the church rather than the goddess herself, while living in the monastery and celebrating religious holidays? What? She then argues that when people walk hand in hand, we don't need gods, as she kills Rhea. One problem. You only win because you're using the power of the goddess with her crest and her relics, and fighting alongside a literal vessel of goddess Sothis herself. But sure, you totally don't need gods. It's just so poorly thought out. Honestly, even the cute little slice of life moments feel so misplaced. The Edge of Dawn was all about her academy days being just a moment lost in time. You know, like the song lyric. But here she's just enjoying that moment forever. I guess that's why they didn't play the song at the end of the game. It doesn't fit. This game's main theme fits every single route except Crimson Flower. And like, why do the Black Eagles want to follow her anyway? Their reasons are so forced and unnatural, it ruins their characters. Petra claims she's doing it for Bridget. Like, Bridget can side with either the Church or the Empire depending on the route, so this isn't a reason to follow the Empire. Dorothea and Bernadetta, who repeatedly mention how much they hate fighting, partner with Edelgard because they like Edelgard and Byleth as friends. These pacifists would start a war over that? Ferdinand wants to guide Edelgard but really just ends up going along with her plans. How is he guiding exactly? Oh, I guess he proposed some changes to the education system, which has nothing to do with the war itself, by the way. You can reform education on either side, Ferdinand. Linhardt and Caspar are especially bizarre. These guys don't even have reasons to fight for the Empire. Caspar fights for her because I don't know what I'll do when I graduate, I guess I'll just fight for you. And Linhardt does it because it would be troublesome to stand against her? Like, what? They'd kill innocents because it's convenient? You have nothing better to do with your lives? None of these characters have any reason to support the Empire, it's so weird. Sure, they have personal reasons to stay near Edelgard like loyalty and friendship, but those are not reasons to start a continental war. That is not how you write a tragic villain. That's how you sand her down into a poorly written protagonist. So does this mean that Edelgard is ruined? Nah, she's still the GOAT, because her portrayal in every other route was perfect. Honestly, when I think of three houses, I think of Edelgard first. She might even be my favorite character. This game would not be one of my favorites without her. I can still enjoy what they did with her storyline, especially in Silver Snow and Azure Moon. That moment where she meets Byleth after the time skip, she was the first one there and they all made this pact to meet up at the monastery. Edelgard, being the lonely girl that she is reaching out for friendship, still shows up. She's not happy, she's not smug, she's not proud of what she's done, she's sad. And when she fights Byleth, you can just see the conflict on her face. She's killing her old identity and accepting who she is now as the Empress of Adrestia, you know, the Flame Emperor. Despite Crimson Flower, I will maintain that Edelgard is still one of the greatest villains of all time because the game never needed Crimson Flower to complete her arc. It was already perfect. Her backstory, the explanation of her trauma, her distrust of authority, it's all perfect. And hopefully this video inspires a more positive discussion of Edelgard as a villain. Feel free to share in the comments whether you agree or disagree. I'm always down to have a conversation, especially about things I love. And if this kind of story analysis is your thing, make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a blessed day.